Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another forecast discussion. This is going to be an update on the forecast for the severe weather event across the southern plains that is expected to begin tonight, Sunday, November 17th, and go through the day tomorrow, Monday, November 18th. We did a forecast discussion video a couple days ago. Some things have changed since then, not so much in where the greatest severe risk is expected to set up, but some things in the environment that have I've noticed here over the last couple of days. So I wanted to give an update on the forecast for tonight into tomorrow, and we're going to do that in this video. For today, and as just before I go into the outlooks here and who's in and who's out, just remember that these outlooks go from 7 a.m. the day of the event to 7 a.m. the following morning. So this particular outlook here for the day one period goes through 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, because this is going to be a pretty continuous threat from tonight into tomorrow. Just wanted to make sure we just wanted to remind you how these outlooks work. So this is through 7 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow. The SPC has the greatest threat for severe weather in the yellow shaded region here. You're level 2 out of 5, slight risk. So basically, folks on the I-10 corridor east of Fort Stockton, so Ozona, Sonora, Junction up to Midland, Odessa, Sweetwater, Abilene, Throckmorton, Seymour, Wichita Falls, and up into Oklahoma, Lawton, Fort Sill, and almost up to the Oklahoma City metro area now. They have extended this slight risk just a hair off to the northeast with this latest outlook. So the OKC metro area is uncomfortably close to this slight risk, but for now, it is in the level 1 out of 5 marginal risk, which does include the OKC metro and the western portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. And again, this goes through 7 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow morning. All hazards are on the table. Tornado threat is at a 5% there, from basically just southwest of the OKC metro area through northwest into West Texas, Midland, Abilene, Throckmorton, Wichita Falls, Lawton, in that greatest 5% tornado risk area, with a 2% extending up around that up to OKC and to the western portions of the DFW metroplex. So the tornado threat is certainly elevated with this setup tonight into tomorrow morning. Damaging wind also going to be a threat. They have added a significant damaging wind contour here in the yellow hatched region there, from basically Abilene northeastward to Lawton, including Wichita Falls there. But overall, a broad 15% area in the yellow region here for some damaging wind gusts, perhaps a couple significant damaging wind gusts in excess of 70 miles an hour here in the yellow stippled region there. Large hail not going to be a risk with this overnight setup tonight. We'll talk about some reasons why that is the case, but certainly the greatest threats are going to be the damaging wind and tornado threat with this setup. Then again, the threat will persist into the daytime hours tomorrow. The SPC has a slight risk from basically Norman, Oklahoma, southward through the Waco, Texas area, and that does include the entire Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. Also places like the WinStar Casino, Ardmore, again up toward the Norman area in that slight risk area for tomorrow, with a broad marginal risk extending out basically down from the Texas coast all the way up into the Kansas City vicinity there of Kansas and Missouri, including places like Wichita, Springfield, Tulsa, OKC, Little Rock, Shreveport, down to Houston and San Antonio and Austin in the level 1 out of 5 marginal risk. It is expected to be kind of a multi-round scenario tomorrow. We'll have our round of storms from the overnight activity moving east, persisting with that tornado and damaging wind risk across north central Texas into southern Oklahoma. And then we may see redevelopment here across places off to the north here in Kansas, as well as places off to the southeast of the line here in East Texas into western Louisiana in particular tomorrow afternoon. All hazards are on the table for tomorrow, just a 2% at this point. For now, by the time you see this video, we will probably have the new day 2 outlook out. But for now, we have a 2% here, just a broad 2% from Austin all the way up that corridor up to the Kansas City region of north central Missouri. And then we also have a damaging wind risk. That is the reason for the slight risk there across north central Texas into southern Oklahoma tomorrow morning. And then maybe an isolated hailstone or two, particularly with the activity that can redevelop in the afternoon, and a little bit better instability. So a pretty widespread risk here for tonight into tomorrow. So let's go ahead and dive in here. First, let's take a look at some of our upper air data. This is the SPC mesoanalysis page, the 500 millibar map at current time. And of course, the feature that we talked about that's going to be the driver for this severe weather event is this particular trough down here, situated over the Gulf of California right now, so pretty far back off to the west compared to where our activity is expected to be tonight. So this is one of the reasons why it's expected to be an overnight event mostly. It's because our trough, it's just simply our trough and our forcing associated with the trough is hanging back to the west quite significantly here. Won't start overspreading the region here of West Texas until sometime this evening into the nighttime hours tonight. This is a cutoff low. You can see our main jet stream is well up here across the northern portion of the U.S. into southern Canada, and this low has become cut off from the main jet stream here and is again going to be our main driver for severe weather in this event as it ejects off to the east-northeast over the next day. We haven't seen very robust low-level response yet. We do see at least a broad low-level cyclone here, broad surface cyclone across northern and central Mexico into West Texas at this point. But because, of course, our trough in the mid and upper levels is still lagging well back to the west here, we won't really see that surface low start really tightening in this corridor until probably late tonight, sometime closer to midnight tonight is when we'll start to see that low really start to deepen across Mexico into West Texas and eastern New Mexico there. So we not to worry as far as a severe threat goes because we already have some robust moisture in place, but we will have a better chance of getting that moisture off to the west as we have these low-level winds back and strengthen with the strengthening of the surface low sometime tonight. Low-level jet, as expected, not all that strong at this point. We do have a little bit of a corridor of 30 to 35 knots here across the eastern half of Texas, but overall, not too much going on at the moment. However, that should strengthen again as the low-level cyclone deepens tonight. We should see that low-level flow start to strengthen and back and really increase, perhaps increasing the tornado threat as well. Some of these soundings you'll see here upcoming, and the way the low-level jet increases through the overnight hours is pretty impressive here. So there certainly will be a tornado threat as that low-level flow strengthens and backs tonight across parts of West Texas into Oklahoma. Let's take a look at our raw surface data here. This is our current surface map. Not a whole lot going on at the moment. As we said, we do see at least maybe a broad cyclonic curvature in the winds here across West Texas. Again, nothing real tight at this point, and that'll stay that way until the nighttime hours tonight. Winds already out of the south or south-southeast, helping to slowly pump that moisture northward. Only about 5 to 10 knots of surface flow here at this point. Again, that will strengthen as we go into the evening, 20 to 25 knots, and really start pumping the more robust moisture here off to the northwest into our region of interest ahead of the developing surface low and frontal features associated with that. Our most robust moisture here across east and southeast Texas, 70s, upper 60s and 70s dew points out here across this area. Again, once that surface low develops, that will start to get pumped northward toward the Red River into Oklahoma. And we will see the threat extend, at least for tonight's and the overnight threat tonight, up into central Oklahoma perhaps. So something to watch for the OKC metro area. We do have broad 60s dew points here across Oklahoma into West Texas at this point, and that should improve going into the nighttime hours tonight. Some soundings from across the region from this morning. This is in Midland, Odessa, so far west Texas here. 61 over 58 at the surface, so somewhat shallow moisture here at this point. Not the case farther off to the east at Dallas-Fort Worth. Adequately moist layer at the surface here, up to about 850 millibars or so. Still somewhat on the shallow side, but more than adequate to support severe weather. And again, with the winds expected to back and strengthen out of the southeast tonight, this slightly deeper moisture will be able to make its way off to the northwest for those storms forming in West Texas. But one thing you'll notice as well is a very strong capping inversion in place across this corridor. Very, very stout warm nose here in excess of negative 330 joules per kilogram mixed layer convective inhibition at this point. And because that for the forcing with the trough is expected to hang back a little bit until the nighttime hours tonight, this cap is going to hold strong through much of the day today. Another reason why we're going to see most of this activity occur after dark. Until that trough comes through, this capping inversion not going to be able to lift and cool and erode fully, and so that is going to keep things at bay for much of the day. Still may see some showery activity here on the warm advection regime out here across the West Texas corridor, maybe some embedded lightning strikes here and there, but nothing severe until after sunset tonight. We do have some steeper lapse rates aloft here. This has been a concern with this setup, that the lapse rates may be a little bit on the weaker side, leading to somewhat weaker instability. These lapse rates are on the higher side here, approaching 9 degrees Celsius per kilometer in this particular layer here, surrounding about 700 to 600 millibars or so. So fairly steep lapse rates aloft. Would not suspect they're going to change all that much across this corridor. We may have some showery activity here through the day that may lead to a little bit more poor lapse rates here, a little bit of a weakening of the lapse rates here in this layer, but still this kind of elevated mixed layer has been transported across this region and is going to help destabilize the atmosphere tonight. As that trough moves in, we'll get some colder air aloft in there as well to help destabilize the atmosphere. Perhaps not a lot, but because this capping inversion will be stubborn to erode and will be, past peak heating, obviously, with the more nighttime activity. But we still should be able to destabilize enough to support robust updrafts in this particular setup. Kinematically, though, this setup is certainly not lacking. Already, fairly favorable, fairly impressive kinematic profiles here. Very lengthy hodograph here at Midland, Odessa, upwards of 70 knots of 0 to 6 kilometer shear. So very strong deep layer shear already, and that is only expected to increase as the stronger flow aloft impinges upon the region tonight. Only about 45, 50 knots or so of flow there at 500 millibars. That, again, is going to increase probably 60, 70 plus knots of flow, helping to even further lengthen these hodographs and allowing for very easy organization into severe storms tonight with strong deep layer shear. Low-level shear is weak at this point, weaker low-level jet right now, but again, once we see that low-level cyclone start to deepen tonight, and it'll undergo some significant deepening, that low-level jet will really ramp up into the overnight hours tonight, providing for strong, warm, moist advection into the region and strong low-level shear. All right, let's take a look at some model data now. We'll take a look at our 12Z NAM run here. This is at 500 millibars. Here is our trough across western Mexico at this point. Again, going to lag back off to the west for much of the day. You'll see the stronger flow associated with this trough doesn't really start to impinge upon West Texas until sometime early this evening. This is at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time tonight. We see those stronger winds finally starting to impinge upon this region by about that time. By this time, we probably will start to see some thunderstorm activity increase in coverage across this area of West Texas into far southeast New Mexico. Probably should remain sub-severe for some time until the atmosphere can really destabilize and really get ready for severe storms. And then once the trough really starts to swing in, that forcing swings in as well by the nighttime hours tonight. This is at midnight tonight. We're right in the exit region of this trough across this area. So at that point, we'll see the stronger forcing for ascent, stronger deep layer and low-level shear start to take place, and that is when we'll start to see the intensity of these storms increase sometime late tonight into early tomorrow morning. Notice that the flow is fairly meridional in this in the exit region of this trough, fairly north-south here, plus with a lot of forcing. This is a fairly compact trough with very strong flow aloft, especially as we go into the morning hours tomorrow. We really see a strengthening of that flow. So nice negatively tilted trough as well. So that's going to do a lot of things. Number one, that is going to allow for a very robust low-level response. Very strong surface low development here expected by probably midnight to early morning tomorrow morning. 1, 2, 3 a.m. we'll start to see a real deepening northeastern ejection of this surface low into West Texas to really improve that low-level wind profile. That's also going to lead to a lot of forcing for ascent. Very compact, strong flow in the exit region of this trough. That is going to allow for a lot of forcing. A lot of storms are going to be able to go up. And with more meridional flow, we'll take a look at how those shear vectors orient with respect to the initiating boundary here in a second. But overall, just with this strong of forcing in place, that is going to allow for a lot of storms to develop in a very quick transition to a more linearly organized complex. And the discrete supercell window is extremely, extremely short. Should see mostly in this setup a very, very quick transition to more of a strongly forced line of storms. So then the trough continues to swing through tomorrow, moves off to the northeast, going into tomorrow morning and early afternoon. We still will have enough forcing to allow the storms to persist through the morning across North Texas into south central Oklahoma, but the main forcing with this trough will be moving off to the northeast across Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, so we could see some additional activity there. We'll talk about that in just a second. But we do see at least a somewhat weakening of the forcing down here across this area, but the cold front associated with the surface low will be moving across this region and will will, with such a glancing blow from the trough, we should see enough activity, forcing for some redevelopment of storms into tomorrow afternoon from the Arklatex southward into East Texas and western Louisiana. Let's go down to the surface here. We'll back up and take a look at how our surface low progresses through tomorrow. So again, not much going on here in the morning hours today. Just broad low-level cyclonic flow here with fairly weak low-level flow. And then we see going into the nighttime hours tonight, this is at 6 p.m. tonight, we start to see a little bit of an increase in the pressure gradient here across Texas. That low starts to really get its act together across northern and central Mexico here. And then as we go into the evening hours tonight, we'll see a quick deepening of this surface cyclone here. You see that closed contour moving off to the north here across West Texas, southeast New Mexico. Low-level flow has backed and strengthened here to 20-plus knots or so out across much of Texas, which will, again, strengthen that low-level shear and allow for strong, warm, moist advection, perhaps all the way up into the central Oklahoma corridor here as well. Then we go into tomorrow morning. This is at 3 a.m., 6 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow. Very tight surface low at this point. That low will be just, at least on this model, just west of the OKC metro area tomorrow morning. And then that warm sector will be right over the DFW metroplex, southern Oklahoma, North Texas for tomorrow morning. So the morning commute tomorrow might get a little bit nasty. Definitely plan for some extra time heading out the door tomorrow in OKC down to the DFW metroplex. Storms will be coming through at this time. And so definitely keep an eye on that as you are heading out the door tomorrow morning. Then the surface low will eject off to the northeast very, very quickly, all the way up into southern Kansas by 9 a.m. tomorrow, and then all the way off into northeastern Kansas by midday or so. Cold front here, well-defined cold front down to the south here along this pressure tongue. That will be our main initiating boundary with this setup. And so that you can see, as we look at our moisture fields, you'll see how progressive this is. Cold frontal forcing, obviously, also a contributing factor usually to a more linearly organized storm mode here. Speaking of our moisture, let's go ahead and take a look here. We already, again, have fairly robust moisture across these areas of West Texas and Oklahoma, those 60s dew points, all the way up to kind of the OKC metro area at this point on the model run. This is at 9 a.m. this morning with some 50s and 60s dew points creeping into West Texas. You will see that moisture advection continue through the day today, and those 60s dew points will kind of set up ahead of that surface low right here across West Texas. This is at midnight tonight. Developing surface low, cold front down here to the south, warm front draped all the way up into central Oklahoma. And so again, OKC certainly needs to be on alert for some severe weather tonight because the warm sector will be OKC will be within the warm sector here, especially going into the early morning hours tomorrow. We go to 3 a.m., you see that is exactly the case. The warm front right in here, right through the OKC metro area. Fairly broad warm sector here. Cold front right in here, surface low, warm front stretching down to that. So we do have a fairly broad warm sector. We talked a couple days ago how the threat for prefrontal open warm sector discrete supercells might be on the low side. This makes me perhaps think otherwise. We'll look at some soundings here in a second from this region, which still makes me think the threat is going to be on the lower end. But with this broad of a warm sector here, there is always a chance for some prefrontal supercells there. So that is going to be a threat that needs to be watched. Again, I think it's going to be a low chance, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But it does need to be watched, as always, with these setups. You can see how progressive this cold front is. Sweeps very quickly east across parts of Texas going into tomorrow morning. You notice the red contours here. Those are our lifted index contours, a measure of instability. You see how they kind of get pinched off and they lessen with time here. This is 9 a.m. tomorrow, and the cold front is approaching the DFW metroplex down the I-35 corridor. Not a ton of instability remaining here, as we've talked about before. We do have enough forcing here to allow the line to persist through the morning hours, but instability will be waning with time. And so, mature storms can persist quite a while into a more hostile environment. So just because we're losing instability here doesn't mean that we won't be able to allow this line to persist into the DFW metroplex with that damaging wind and tornado risk into the morning hours. Again, this is at 9 a.m. tomorrow, approaching the DFW metroplex, so that morning commute may get a little bit messy tomorrow across the DFW area. Then things sweep through. We basically lose most of our instability here across eastern Oklahoma into the Arklatex. But down here where our 70s dew points are, that's where our most robust instability appears to be. And then we see more of, probably see redevelopment here along the cold front across East Texas into western Louisiana tomorrow afternoon, and perhaps an area up here across western Kansas as well. We'll go into that here in just a second. Now, also here, we'll take a look at our shear vector orientation with respect to the cold front. And you'll notice here, so I'll draw in our cold front. This is tomorrow morning. Cold front looks something like that. Warm front up in here as well. And we'll look at our shear vectors with respect to the initiating boundaries. We do see a little bit of perpendicularity down here along the cold front in particular, but again, such strong forcing with such a progressive cold front from west to east, that should allow for really no window for discrete supercells along the actual cold front here, along the warm front as well, fairly parallel shear vectors with respect to that warm front. So the storm mode here with such strong forcing, even though we do have a little bit of perpendicularity with respect to the initiating boundary, if we do go back in time here along the cold front, you'll see those shear vectors are much more parallel there going into this evening, tonight, the nighttime hours tonight. Those shear vectors very much parallel to the developing cold front there. So that should lead to a very, very quick transition to a squall line, really no window for discrete supercells along the actual cold front and warm front as well up in Oklahoma. So with strong forcing, unfavorable shear vector orientation, and this very progressive cold front, that should lead to a very quick transition to a line. All right, let's take a look at some forecast soundings from across the region. We'll start at 60 here when things are really expected to start getting going across West Texas. We'll take a sounding between Midland to Odessa and the Fort Stockton area here. So this is out across this area, and a couple days ago, some of our forecast soundings were really on the weaker side as far as instability goes. They were not showing a lot of instability at all, very weak lapse rates aloft, and we do see some weakening of those lapse rates aloft compared to what we saw this morning. But we still have more than adequate lapse rates here across this layer here of the atmosphere in the mid levels, 6 to 7 degrees Celsius per kilometer here in the mid levels, leading to some destabilization of the environment. About 800 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE here, strong low-level instability as well, 0 to 3 kilometer CAPE in excess of 170 joules per kilogram there. So definitely an improvement from what we saw a couple days ago in our with that data in that first video here, and this should lead to be more than enough for robust updrafts, even though it's on the lower side. This time of year, you don't need all that much, especially with strong kinematics in play like we talked about. You don't need all that much instability to support robust updrafts. So we definitely have enough instability to support a severe threat here. This is again at midnight across West Texas. Our kinematics certainly not lacking as well. 0 to 6 kilometer shear at 75 knots. So very long hodographs, really off of that rest of the hodograph off the chart here. So very, very strong deep layer shear to help organize these storms into a severe line. And we have stronger low-level shear. That low-level those low-level winds have now backed out of the southeast as that surface low gets going. Nice veering and strengthening of the winds with height there, leading to strong low-level shear in excess of 250 meters squared per second squared effective storm relative helicity, leading to a tornado risk with this setup. Low-level shear vectors also are kind of perpendicular to the cold front orientation, which will be the squall line orientation. When that is the case, that tends to be a little bit better for tornadic production within the squall line with little embedded circulations there. I believe it's our 1 to 3 kilometer shear vectors is what we usually use here. And you can see from the end of the pink to the end of the red, those are mostly sort of west-southwesterly there. If our line is oriented like this, very much perpendicular to the line. So the tornado threat here with this line should be fairly elevated. Fairly good news that we don't have a discrete storm mode here, as this is very strong low-level shear. And therefore, if we had more discrete storms to worry about, we would have a potential for more significant tornadic activity. But because we have more of a squall line here, we should see mostly more brief spin-up type tornadoes within the squall line. Now, one thing I want to note here, again, we do have a pretty strong advection of the better moisture here up into central and up really toward the Red River here by this point. I would suspect we're going to see very strong warm advection here in this regime, and as we know, that can be enough to initiate some discrete supercells out here well ahead of the main frontal boundary. Our main cold front back here, again, a broad warm sector, strong, higher moisture here out across this corridor, strong warm advection. The question is, are we going to see enough ingredients to sustain supercells out in this corridor? If that is the case, if we do, that would foster a greater severe risk out here, including a tornado risk. Now, at this point, 6Z, midnight, we still see pretty strong capping in place. That trough still off to the west. That forcing to help erode the cap fully will not be in place quite yet. We do see growing instability, though, up to 700 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE out here. and a profile kinematically that is favorable for supercells with a tornado threat. Nice low-level shear, strong deep layer shear. So that is something that is going to have to be watched for sure. Out this area across central Texas into north central Texas and Oklahoma, if we can sustain discrete supercells out here, they would have a chance to produce perhaps more significant severe weather activity. Again, the main severe weather threat going to be on the cold front. Given the lack of instability here, that warm nose out in this region, I still suspect we'll have a fairly low chance for sustaining supercells out in this corridor, but as we saw with our last event in early November across central Oklahoma, if we get supercells to fire in such a strong kinematic environment, anything can happen, including some significant tornadoes there. So let's move on here. 3 a.m. Central Standard Time, cold front progressing off to the east nicely. Let's take a sounding here out kind of in the Abilene area, just out ahead of the cold front. We'll take a sounding out here as well, just west of DFW, right in that warm advection regime in the better moisture corridor. And this is pretty nasty looking. This is pretty impressive here. Not a ton of instability. Again, 800 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE, a little bit on the skinny side here. So not the most textbook looking look for instability here thermodynamically in a given severe weather environment, but certainly enough to support robust updrafts. But look at this photograph. We have increased the low-level shear dramatically by this point, almost 500 meters squared per second squared effective storm relative velocity. As the low-level cyclone continues to deepen rapidly, that low-level jet will really, really ramp up here. We have 850 millibar flow, really 60 to 70 knots. So that low-level jet is going to be screaming tonight as that low-level cyclone intensifies, helping to really ramp up the low-level jet and increase the tornado threat within this squall line. Again, thank goodness we don't have a robust discrete supercell threat, and we'll see a quick transition to a line, because if we did, we'd be talking about a significant tornado risk with this kind of a kinematic profile. Out in the open warm sector, again, instability is on the weak side here. Very skinny instability, a little bit of a warm nose there. But it is enough instability to perhaps support a supercell or two out in the open warm sector. So again, because of the lack of overall instability here and this warm nose, I'm not convinced, not sold on an overall robust open warm sector supercell threat out here across more of central and north central Texas into southern Oklahoma. But with this kinematic profile in place, we certainly need to watch. If any supercell can get going in the open warm sector, we certainly would have a more robust tornado risk there with such strong low-level shear, upwards of 400 meters squared per second squared effective storm relative velocity, and strong deep layer shear. So something to watch very, very closely out here, well ahead of the cold front. Out here, DFW, Wichita Falls, Brownwood, Brady over to the I-35 corridor there, Waco to Austin, into southern Oklahoma there. Definitely needs to watch out ahead of the cold front for perhaps a supercell or two getting going this evening, early tomorrow morning, especially as that instability perhaps becomes just enough to support the maintenance of supercells out in this corridor. Again, a low threat. I think still the threat will remain low given somewhat skinny, not super favorable thermodynamics, but it might be just enough to support a supercell or two out in this corridor. But again, the main threat going to be along the cold front and warm front up here from Oklahoma southward. Then we go into tomorrow morning, 12Z, 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. The line will continue to move off to the east. I'll take a sounding here just west of the DFW Metroplex, and I'll take one up here into just south of the OKC metro area. You can see the lifted index contours here up into north central Oklahoma. So OKC will be in the warm sector here. So going into tomorrow morning, definitely we'll need to watch out in that vicinity there, the OKC vicinity, for some nastier storms there within the line, perhaps a tornado risk and damaging wind risk there as well. Just west of the DFW Metroplex, and this is just insane. This is incredible. Skinny instability. We are kind of losing instability with time, but still enough to support robust updrafts, almost 800 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE. But that photograph, it's literally almost off the charts. Over 800 meters squared per second squared effective storm relative velocity. That's insane. Incredible curvature in the low levels of the photograph. That low-level jet continues to strengthen. 850 millibar winds of 70 knots there. A change out of the south, a change from south-southeasterly, 25-knot winds at the surface. So very strong veering and strengthening of the winds with height there across this corridor. Again, this is at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time, just west of the DFW Metroplex. So that line if any circulations can get going, we may even see a strong tornado threat with any circulations in the line. They may still be on the brief side because of the linear nature of the storms, but we could see perhaps a strong spin up or two with this much low-level shear in place. That is something that is nasty looking. So definitely need to be on alert there in this portion of Texas. Into Oklahoma as well, you can see a little bit less instability, skinny instability up here, but again, just enough. And one thing I will mention, we've talked about this before, the low-level shear, strong low-level shear and storm relative helicity can actually add to the buoyancy in a given environment beyond what the contribution of convective available potential energy is. So even in this environment where we have very skinny instability, only 700 joules per kilogram mixed layer Cape, very skinny instability, because we have such strong low-level shear, that can actually add dynamically to the buoyancy in the environment to allow for more buoyancy and upward motion based on just what we have on mixed layer Cape. So that strong low-level shear, if we have robust updrafts in this area, tornado threat will certainly be elevated. Again, this is OKC. At 6 a.m. tomorrow, certainly favorable for tornadic activity and some damaging wind gusts in the line or with any more embedded supercell elements within the line there. Then we move off to the morning hours tomorrow. The instability kind of becomes sapped here across this region. Thankfully, with this much shear in place, thank goodness we have the instability decreasing with time. This is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Cold front through the OKC metro area there, approaching the DFW metroplex. So again, the morning commute there, OKC down to Dallas-Fort Worth and even down the I-35 corridor south of DFW needs to plan for some extra time tomorrow. But again, we'll take a sounding here, Fort Worth tomorrow, right ahead of the cold front, and we still will see an impressive kinematic profile, but thankfully instability will be decreasing with time. You can see here, thermodynamics not all that favorable to sustain severe storms, but our kinematics will remain pretty strong. So even though we are decreasing in instability, we know that strong, mature storms can persist into more hostile environments for severe weather for a little bit longer than expected, especially with this amount of low-level shear. So Dallas-Fort Worth, Metroplex, OKC, down the I-35 corridor certainly needs to be on alert tomorrow morning as this line comes through. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 a.m. For the threat for this line with some isolated damaging wind gusts and perhaps some spin-up tornadoes as well. Instability becomes sapped here across this region, and so we probably will see the line decrease in intensity going into the late morning and early afternoon hours tomorrow. We'll need to see some recovery here, and we do see the stronger dew points down here in southeast Texas starting to advect their way northward ahead of the cold front. This is at 21Z, so 3 p.m., that cold front there. More instability across this corridor. With better dew points there, would expect to see some reinvigoration and redevelopment of convection along the cold front here across East Texas by tomorrow afternoon. We also have a separate area up here that we'll need to watch across parts of Kansas as well. We talked about the potential cold core threat up here in parts of Kansas, northern Oklahoma into Kansas Monday afternoon. I'm not quite as gung-ho as I was on it a couple days ago. The features have kind of trended a little bit less favorable for traditional cold core tornadic activity. Let me show you here. So this is going to be, we'll go back to our 500 millibar map here. And you'll see, so this is the 500 millibar map. 21Z on Monday. We do have a closed circulation here out across this corridor. So our 500 millibar low somewhere in there. Colder air aloft. Definitely not quite as cold as it was once progged to be, but still certainly favorable for robust destabilization there within this environment. Sorry, COD is glitching here a little bit. So there's your 500 millibar low center. Your surface low center is going to be somewhere in this vicinity here. So your surface low is a little bit farther removed from your mid-level cyclone center. And this is not all that unfavorable, but notice where your instability is here. Your boundary intersection, your cold front here and your warm front is kind of well removed from the surface low. Your surface low will be more of an occluded type surface low here with the boundary intersection farther removed from the surface low. Whereas a couple days ago, you had I'll actually go back a couple days, no data response. That's unfortunate here. Unfortunately, we can't go back a couple days on COD here, but a couple days ago, your low level, your surface low center and your 500 millibar cyclone were much closer together. Your boundary intersection was much more tied to the actual surface low itself. Whereas now, at this point, your surface low, looks like COD is glitching a little bit here, unfortunately. My apologies. So let me go forward here to 21Z Tuesday. So your surface low center is up here. Your boundary intersection is down here. Davies and Geyer, we know John Davies is our favorite cold core meteorologist. He found that that was not quite as favorable for tornadic activity in cold core events. And you see here, this panel on the left, these are two situations where tornadoes are less likely with cold core closed 500 millibar lows. You see here, we do have the close proximity of the 500 millibar low and the surface low, but our boundary intersection, when it's farther removed from the surface low, actually is not quite as favorable for tornadic activity. So, whereas a couple days ago it looked more like this, you're a little bit more favorable here. Your boundary intersection right near the surface low and your 500 millibar low and surface low in close proximity to one another, that has trended toward a little bit more of a solution that is less favorable for cold core tornadoes with something like this in panel A here, where your boundary intersection is farther removed from the surface low itself. So not quite as favorable of an environment here across parts of Kansas Monday afternoon for a cold core tornado risk, but still, we will have a favorable environment here across this corridor. Very, very cold core-esque environment here with very limited instability, but it is all packed here in the low levels of the atmosphere. Very strong low-level instability as well. 250 joules per kilogram, 0 to 3 kilometer cape, so very fat low-level instability here. Steep lapse rates aloft. If any storms can get going, they would perhaps possess a risk for some isolated large hail, isolated damaging wind, and maybe a tornado or two, especially with this much low-level shear, a little bit higher than what we usually see with a cold core event. And, of course, that vorticity near the surface low will be able to be efficiently stretched into the vertical, or near the surface boundaries, able to be efficiently stretched into the vertical with strong low-level instability. But, again, not quite as favorable. Would like to see that boundary intersection a little bit closer up here into the surface low. Then we have a little bit better chance for tornadic activity. Here, not quite as favorable of an overall setup with the actual features in this event. Still something to watch up there in Kansas, and the marginal risk, level 1 out of 5 risk, does cover that, and that risk should persist into the afternoon. Plus, again, with how progressive this system is, I'm not sure how long the window will be. The features will just be screaming off to the northeast, and so there may not be much of a window here before instability wanes starting Monday evening. Down here into East Texas again, redevelopment possible out here in East Texas Monday afternoon, and the environment will remain favorable for all hazards there. Plenty of instability, about 900 joules per kilogram mixed layer cape with strong low level and deep layer shear once again. So we will likely have redevelopment here along the cold front in East Texas with that all hazards risk there. And then things will be out of here into the Gulf Coast states by Tuesday. There is a marginal risk out here for Tuesday where the warm sector remains inland. Brief tornado or two possible with some damaging wind gusts out there, southeast Louisiana into the Florida Panhandle region there. All right, let's take a look at some convection-allowing models. This is our 12Z HER run. And so let's go forward here. You'll see some showery activity, perhaps some embedded lightning strikes here across West Texas through much of the afternoon, but nothing severe at all. You'll see coverage of thunderstorms start to increase here by 6 to 7 p.m. across far West Texas. Again, mostly subsevere at this point. The atmosphere won't quite be as favorable yet for severe weather, but as we go through the evening, as that surface low deepens, as the instability increases, you'll see the intensity of these storms increase as well. This is at 9 p.m. tonight, much stronger cores here. Very messy storm mode right off from the get-go. You see here not much opportunity for discrete storms, and we'll congeal things quickly into a line here. By late evening, 11 p.m. to midnight or so, a strongly forced squall line here moving across West Texas. Now, this is the corridor that we need to keep an eye on as well. The HER is progging some supercells out here, or at least some convection out here along this corridor. Here's your main line back out here to the west. This is at 2 a.m. Central Standard Time. Strongly forced line, embedded tornadic circulations possible, as well as some strong wind gusts. That's where your main severe threat will come from. The HER is progging a few stronger cores here in this warm advection regime well out ahead of the cold frontal convection. So that will have to be watched. Again, I think the instability may be just a little too weak to really sustain robust updrafts out in this corridor, but if we can sustain a robust updraft or two, which this model, the HER doesn't say is impossible, we would need to watch those for a tornado risk as well as a damaging wind risk out here in the open warm sector. southern Oklahoma to north central Texas especially. Squall line moves through. This is by 6 a.m. tomorrow, 7 a.m. tomorrow. You see perhaps some more cellular elements up here in the line up approaching the OKC Metroplex by the morning commute. So OKC area definitely needs to be on alert there for tomorrow morning. Strongly forced squall line. You see, though, down here to the south, it is a pencil-thin squall line, so that is some evidence that we're losing some instability here. But perhaps we still will see a threat for some embedded circulations and some damaging wind gusts there as the line moves through southern Oklahoma into north central Texas. The line decreases in intensity going through the afternoon, and we see some additional development out here along the cold front by Monday afternoon. Down there in East Texas into western Louisiana. Arkansas perhaps as well. A lot of this convection is being progged by the HRRR to be sort of anafrontal behind the front here. So most of this would be elevated if this was the case. Down here, not so much. So that would foster that all hazards risk with redevelopment down there, particularly in East Texas to western Louisiana. The HRRR not showing much in the way of that area of potential cold core-esque activity in Kansas here. We do see the stuff move through pretty quickly out here across Kansas. Dry slot moving in here to help destabilize things, the colder air aloft. Perhaps some chance of development out here in Kansas near the surface low. Again, the surface low on the NAM was up here near the Kansas-Nebraska border, so I wonder if this is the case with the HRRR. Let's see here if it is the case. So here we are, 21Z, and I'll take a look at the surface low. So your convection out back in here, and again, so not all that favorable. Most of your convection is out there close to the surface low, away from the best moisture here, your boundary intersection up in here, and most of that convection is south of it. So not all that favorable for a cold core tornado risk. If we had most of our convection up in here, which the HRRR is not really showing, I'll go back to the simulated reflectivity here. If that was the case, then we would be talking about a more robust cold core tornado risk. Here, not so much. Maybe a couple of these, if they can get going, would foster a tornado risk, but does not look all that favorable for a more robust cold core tornado risk tomorrow afternoon across Kansas. All right, here's the WRF ARW model. Much of the same here, some showery, stormy activity out here for much of the day across West Texas. Coverage increases by early evening. And then intensity increases furthermore going into late evening. This is at 11 p.m. Nice, strongly forced squall line here across West Texas. Embedded tornado risk, damaging wind risk. The ARW does have a band of convection out here, southern Oklahoma into north central Texas, so that will have to be watched closely. Not all that robust, but as we know, the cams don't do a great job with the intensity of prefrontal activity all that often. So the fact that it has robust convection out here in the open warm sector is a little bit concerning, especially in that environment that we talked about, very favorable kinematically for a tornado risk. Maybe an outside chance of a strong tornado, particularly even in the line as well, with some of the stronger spin-ups in the line. But if a supercell can get going, strong tornado cannot be ruled out. But again, I think it's a low threat given the lack of instability out here in the open warm sector. But if a storm can get going, would foster that tornado risk and damaging wind risk as well. Tomorrow morning, the line moves through. This is at 8 a.m., moving right through the OKC metro area, as well as Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex there. Embedded tornado risk, damaging wind risk across those areas. Again, take some extra time tomorrow morning heading out the door. And then the line moves through, decreases in intensity, additional activity tomorrow across southeast Texas. Let's check our Kansas sector here just to see what it has for tomorrow. So you see the destabilization. We do see maybe a little bit of activity here in a little bit of a band out ahead of the surface low. If this were to take shape, that would foster a better tornado risk, assuming the surface low is somewhere in here. Your boundary is kind of right in here, so that would make sense there for a little bit better tornado risk with any activity there. But again, I think it's going to be a low risk up there, and the marginal risk should suffice for now. NSSL WRF down here in the southern sector. Much of the same activity, increases in coverage there by early evening, in intensity by late evening, early morning. Strongly forced squall line. We do see some convection out ahead of the cold frontal band of storms, so that needs to be watched for sure. Goes to the OKC and Dallas-Fort Worth areas, 8, 9 a.m. tomorrow, and then we see redevelopment there along the cold front later on in the afternoon. Across the Kansas sector, not a whole lot of activity, maybe a little bit there, but not very robust at all. So a very low end risk there, but certainly needs to be monitored there in Kansas. So that is going to do it for this video. Once again, we have a slight risk level 2 out of 5 through tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. This is where the greatest risk is expected to be. The yellow shaded region here, level 2 out of 5, slight risk. So again, the I-10 corridor east of Fort Stockton, Ozona, Sonora, Junction, up to Midland, Odessa, Sweetwater, Abilene, Throckmorton, Seymour, Wichita Falls, Childress, up to Lawton and Fort Sill, almost up to the OKC metro area. OKC definitely needs to be on alert tomorrow. Would not be surprised to see this expanded, this slight risk expanded to cover the OKC area in future outlooks if we get a little bit more confidence in more robust activity up in here. But some of the models are certainly showing tomorrow morning, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m., that the line may have some embedded supercellular elements in here that would pose a tornado and damaging wind risk. All hazards on the table for tomorrow, 5% tornado risk for now, stretching from the I-10 corridor northeastward through northwest Texas and southwest Oklahoma, with a 2% surrounding that and a damaging wind risk going to be perhaps most significant there from Abilene northeastward into the Lawton area, where a few significant damaging wind gusts could occur. Then we go into tomorrow. The threat continues through the morning. Slight risk there, level 2 out of 5, to cover that line as it moves through southern Oklahoma into north central Texas. OKC, once again, should be on alert tomorrow morning for perhaps an extension of the slight risk into the OKC metro area. So let's just, everyone in OKC, assume that you are in the slight risk here and take precautions as such. DFW Metroplex in that slight risk there, as well as Waco tomorrow morning as the line moves through. Again, we will see decreasing instability with time, but we'll have to watch for maybe some prefrontal supercells in the early morning hours tomorrow out here. And then as the line comes through, we will see decreasing instability, but strong low-level shear should allow the damaging wind and tornado threat to persist through this slight risk area into the morning hours before the line really weakens into the afternoon. And we see some redevelopment here where the moisture is greatest and destabilization is greatest out here in the eastern and southeast Texas corridor into western Louisiana in particular. We'll see storms move off to the northeast as well, with some possible redevelopment here across central Kansas. Low-end risk for some cold core type severe weather activity out there. Maybe a low-end risk for a tornado or two with some isolated large hail and damaging wind gusts, but it is a conditional risk and not all that high of a risk up there as well, given that the features are not all that favorable for typical cold core tornado events. So this is going to be a nasty one for sure. So definitely, of course, never like to see these overnight events, but that is what we have on tap for this evening into the nighttime hours tonight. So keep those weather radios handy by the bedside tonight in case you have a weather warning issued for your area. Have multiple ways of receiving warnings. Again, Oklahoma City metro area, DFW metro area. The morning commute tomorrow may be on the nastier side, so allow for some extra time, stay weather aware, and we'll get through this event just fine. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.